I never expected a family dinner to become the moment my entire life snapped open. My name is Madison Clark, and I was adopted when I was 5 years old. For 22 years, I tried to believe I belonged. But the night my adoptive sister mocked me in front of an entire restaurant, and the waiter dropped a $3,000 bill in front of me, as if I existed only to serve them, something changed. People say families protect you. Mine was about to do the opposite, and they had no idea what was coming next. I should have known the night was going to end badly. There is a certain heaviness that settles in your chest when you walk toward people who call themselves your family but treat you like a guest who overstayed her welcome. That heaviness was already there when I pulled open the polished glass door of Belmont House, one of the most expensive restaurants in Seattle. But I kept telling myself to breathe, to be civil, to survive another night of pretending. The restaurant was warm and golden, chandeliers catching in my eyes as if mocking the dull ache in my chest. My adoptive parents sat at the long table, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. My sister Brooke, 30 years old and perpetually smug, was already swirling a glass of wine like she owned the place. My brother Dylan tapped away on his phone, not even glancing up. I hesitated, just for a breath, before stepping toward them. "Madison, you made it." My mother, Linda, said it with a smile that never touched her eyes. I'd stopped hoping it ever would. My father, Charles, nodded without getting up. Brooke barely looked at me before smirking, and behind her, a few seats down, sat the only person whose presence didn't make my stomach twist, Grandma Eleanor. She lifted her gaze when she saw me, her expression softening the way the ocean softens against the shore. "Sit next to me, sweetheart." Her voice was steady, warm in a way I wasn't used to. A part of me unclenched. But Brooke got to me first. "Look who finally showed up," she said loudly. "I guess even adopted girls can read a clock sometimes." The table laughed. Not politely, not lightly, not the way families tease each other when there's love behind it. This was sharp, intentional, designed to slice. The restaurant went quiet for a split second as other guests glanced over. Heat crawled up my neck. I forced a smile because that was the role I'd been trained to play. Don't react, don't escalate, survive. I sat down, choosing the seat next to Eleanor, trying to make myself smaller, tried to breathe, tried to pretend it didn't sting after all these years. Dinner continued the way it always did. Brooke bragged about her latest consulting job. Dylan talked about his promotion at the bank. My parents beamed like proud royalty surveying their heirs. When I tried to mention landing a major new client for my graphic design business, my mother cut me off before the sentence even ended. "That's nice, honey. Brooke, tell us about the investor you met." And just like that, I disappeared again. They always made sure I did. I picked at my meal, listening to their voices wash over me like static. I used to think if I worked harder, achieved more, stayed quiet enough, they would finally see me, but the truth was painfully simple. They only saw what they wanted to see, and what they wanted was someone beneath them, someone who made them feel superior just by existing. Still, I stayed. Still, I smiled. Still, I swallowed it all because walking away from a family feels like walking away from the last lifeline you have left. Dessert came and went. My parents ordered a second expensive bottle of wine. Dylan got 3 desserts, laughing that he could never choose. I quietly reminded myself that my rent was due soon, that I still had student loan payments, that the new equipment for my business had drained most of my savings. But I said nothing. I always said nothing. Until the moment that changed everything. A waiter approached, holding a sleek, black leather folder. I expected him to hand it to my father, or Brooke, or anyone else at the table, but he placed it directly in front of me. I stared at it, confused. I didn't touch it. Then Brooke laughed. A sharp, delighted sound that made the hairs on my arms lift. "Didn't we tell you? You're paying tonight." My heart slammed against my ribs. "What?" "Consider it your contribution to the family," she said sweetly, "since you always take and never give." I felt Eleanor shift beside me, her energy snapping like a drawn wire. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mother chimed in, tapping her manicured finger on the table. "Madison, we gave you a home, food, clothes, everything. Picking up one dinner is the least you can do." I swallowed hard. "I've never asked you for anything." "The roof over your head wasn't free," my father said flatly. Don't be dramatic. I opened the folder. My vision blurred. $3,270. They had ordered the most expensive items on the menu, wine priced like jewelry, meals I couldn't afford in a dream, and they expected me to absorb it without question, without protest. The hook of truth stabbed clean through me. Families don't test your loyalty. Toxic families test how much you'll tolerate before you finally break. My hands were shaking when I handed the waiter my card. He looked at me with quiet sympathy. I hated that I needed it. As he walked away, Brooke raised her glass. Same time next month? The table laughed again. But this time, I didn't, because for the first time in my life, I felt something rising in me that wasn't fear. Something sharper. Something stronger. Something that whispered, "They think they're untouchable. They have no idea what's coming." I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the waiter disappeared with my credit card. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a fist around my lungs. All around me, laughter flowed easy light, careless, cruel, the kind of laughter people use when they know you can't fight back. But that night, something in me had shifted, cracked, and the crack was about to become an earthquake. I kept my eyes down, pretending the tablecloth pattern was suddenly fascinating, pretending I wasn't falling apart, pretending I didn't feel the sting of being reminded, once again, that in this family, I was tolerated, not loved. Then, I felt a hand rest gently on my forearm. "Madison, sweetheart. Look at me." I lifted my head. Grandma Eleanor's eyes were fixed on mine, steady, warm, but burning with something fierce underneath. Something I'd seen only a handful of times, and each time I'd seen it, someone had ended up regretting their choices. She squeezed my arm, a silent message. "I'm here. I see you. You're not alone." Then she turned her head toward the rest of the table. "Enough." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone alone sliced through the noise, through the chatter, through the polished ceramic plates and crystal glasses. Even the table behind us went still. My mother blinked. "What?" Eleanor straightened in her seat, her posture perfect despite her age. She placed her napkin on the table with slow, deliberate control, the kind that made the air shift. I said enough. Brooke rolled her eyes. "Oh God, Grandma, don't start. Don't interrupt me." The words were soft, deadly. If conversations were roads, hers had just become a dead end. The hook curled at the base of my spine. You can always tell who really loves you by who stands up the moment you can't stand up for yourself. I'd never needed that reminder more. Eleanor's gaze swept across the table, not hurried, not emotional, but clinical, analyzing each face like she was cataloging sins she'd witnessed for years. "Let me see if I understand correctly," she said calmly. "You mock Madison, belittle her, dismiss her successes, and tonight you force her to pay a $3,000 bill for a meal she barely ate?" My father stiffened. "Mother, this is a family matter." Eleanor cut him off with a look sharp enough to stop a heartbeat. "A family matter?" she repeated. "Is that what we're calling abuse now?" My mother gasped. "Abuse? Don't be ridiculous. We raised her. We gave her everything. You gave her scraps," Eleanor said, her voice turning colder than I'd ever heard it, "and expected her to be grateful for crumbs you should have offered freely as parents." Nobody spoke. If silence could burn, the table would have been ash. Eleanor leaned slightly forward, her eyes locked on Brooke. "You," she said, "have humiliated Madison her entire life. And you enjoy it." Brooke scoffed. "Oh, please. It's just teasing." "Teasing?" Eleanor's laugh was quiet, disbelieving. "Teasing is playful. What you do is cruelty dressed as humor." Brooke's cheeks flushed, her smirk faltered. Eleanor turned to Dylan next. "You've stood by and watched. Not once have you defended her." Dylan swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. Then she looked at my parents. "As for you, Linda and Charles, I have watched you treat this young woman, your adopted daughter, as though she is permanently indebted to you for a kindness you never actually gave." My mother bristled. "You don't know what you're talking about." Eleanor exhaled slowly. The sound wasn't tired, it was disappointed, deeply. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. For 22 years, I have watched you celebrate Brooke and Dylan while ignoring Madison. I've watched you give them opportunities, praise, attention, and offer her nothing but criticism and exclusion." My throat tightened. Hearing the truth spoken out loud felt like stepping into the sun after years in the dark. "You may fool everyone else," Eleanor continued, "but you have never fooled me." My father leaned back, jaw clenched. "This is unnecessary drama." "Drama?" Eleanor shook her head. "Drama is when someone spills a drink. What you've done is character assassinations, low, intentional, and cruel." The restaurant staff had stopped pretending not to listen. 2 tables over, a woman had pulled out her phone, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. My mother forced a smile that cracked at the edges. "Mother, this is not the place." "Oh, I think it is." Eleanor stood slowly, deliberately. "Because tonight, I've decided something." The room seemed to tilt. I could hear the bass of my heartbeat in my ears. Brooke narrowed her eyes. "What decision?" Eleanor looked down at me, and her expression softened for the first time that night. The fire faded, and the warmth returned. "I will not let you be treated like this another day. Not one more." She turned to the table. "And I will no longer allow this family to pretend they are something they are not." My father exhaled sharply. "Enough of this. Sit down." But Eleanor didn't move. "Tonight," she said, voice steady, "everything changes." A chill ran through me. I didn't understand what she meant yet, but something deep inside me whispered that the ground beneath this family was about to shift forever, and none of them were ready. Not Brooke, not Dylan, not my parents, and especially not me. I didn't understand what she meant not yet, but everyone at the table felt the shift, like the air had dropped 10 degrees. The restaurant lights didn't dim, but it felt darker somehow, sharper, as though the truth had finally decided to step into the room. Eleanor stood fully now, pushing her chair back with a soft scrape that carried more force than raised voices ever could. Conversations around us had died completely. Even the bar in the distance had gone quiet. My mother's smile faltered. "Mother, sit down. People are staring." "They should stare," Eleanor said. "It's time someone saw this family for who they really are." Brooke crossed her arms. "Oh my God, Grandma, can you not do this here?" "Why not here?" Eleanor asked, looking directly at Brooke with a gaze that made even the servers freeze mid-step. "Why not at the same table where you humiliated Madison? Why not at the same place where you expected her to pay for your excess?" My father clenched his jaw. "Mother, stop with the theatrics." "This isn't theatrics," she replied calmly. "This is accountability, something this family has never learned." My heartbeat wasn't just in my chest, it was in my throat, my ears, my fingertips. I wanted to tell her to sit down, to rest, to not waste her energy on people who didn't deserve an ounce of it. But she didn't even look tired. She looked resolute. Then she reached into her handbag. A small envelope emerged, cream-colored, thick, official. Every motion was precise, intentional, like she was holding a detonator instead of paper. Brooke noticed it first. "What is that?" Eleanor didn't answer her. She looked at me instead. And in that moment, her eyes softened in a way they rarely did, like she was passing me something she'd been holding on to for years. "Madison," she said, her voice steady, "you deserve to know the truth." My mother stiffened. "The truth about what?" Eleanor turned to her daughter with a controlled, icy calm that made the hairs rise on the back of my neck. "About the consequences." My father leaned forward. "Consequences? For what?" Eleanor inhaled deeply, then spoke with a clarity sharp enough to split stone. "I've changed my will." The table fell, silent, not the silence of surprise, but the silence of fear, the kind that comes before a storm you can already taste in the air. Brooke laughed once short, nervous. "Okay. And? You do this all the time." My mother forced herself to smile. "Mother, you're being emotional. Let's talk about this at home." "No," Eleanor said. "We will talk about it now. In the same place where you showed Madison exactly what she means to this family." "And what's that supposed to mean?" Dylan muttered. Eleanor opened the envelope and pulled out several documents neatly folded, legal, unmistakably final. "What are those?" my father demanded. "A copy of my new will," she said, signed, notarized, filed with my attorney. Brooke's smirk slowly died. "Why are you bringing that here?" "Because," Eleanor said, fixing her eyes on each of them one by one, "you deserve to hear this in person." My stomach tightened. I had no idea what she was about to say, but my entire body knew it would change everything. Eleanor laid the papers on the table, The previous version of my will gestured at Brooke, then Dylan, then my mother would have given my estate to you, divided among my daughter and my grandchildren. My mother nodded quickly. Exactly. So why are we? But that is no longer the case, Eleanor interrupted. Her voice didn't waver, her hands didn't shake. She wasn't emotional, she was absolute. Brooke scoffed. You're kidding. No, Eleanor said simply. I've spent months reviewing my life, my legacy, and the kind of people I want representing the Whitmore name after I'm gone. My father frowned. Mother, this is absurd. What's absurd, Eleanor said sharply, is raising a child as though she is less than. What's absurd is mocking someone you were supposed to love. What's absurd is tonight. She turned to me, her voice softening. Madison is the only one among you who has shown integrity, humility, and kindness. She has worked for everything she has. She has never expected anything from this family, despite being given so little. Brooke's chair screeched as she stood abruptly. Are you saying? Yes, Eleanor said, cutting her off. I am saying exactly that. She lifted the final page from the stack and placed it in front of them like a judge delivering a sentence. My entire estate, including all assets, investments, companies, and properties will go to Madison Clark. The world went still. Brooke's mouth fell open. Dylan froze, his fork suspended mid-air. My father blanched. My mother whispered a trembling, "No, no," under her breath. But I couldn't move. I stared at Eleanor, my breath catching somewhere between grief, disbelief, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Brooke was the first to explode. "You can't do that," she shouted, drawing stares from every table in the restaurant. "You don't just rewrite the entire will because of some guilt trip. She's not even blood." The words cut through me, but Eleanor didn't flinch. "And yet," she said, "she is more family than any of you have ever been." My father shoved his chair back. "Mother, you are not thinking clearly, you're being manipulated." Eleanor faced him with a calm I'll never forget. "The only manipulation here is the 22 years this family has spent convincing themselves they were good to Madison." The hook dropped into the moment like lightning. When the truth finally stands up, lies don't know where to hide. Brooke pointed at me, shaking with rage. "You planned this. You think you're better than us. You're nothing but—" "Sit down," Eleanor commanded. And Brooke sat. The power in Eleanor's voice wasn't volume, it was certainty. The certainty of someone who had seen enough, stayed silent long enough, and finally decided the time had come. Eleanor turned back to me, placing her hand gently over mine. "You are my heir, Madison." My breath trembled. "From this moment forward," she said, "you will never be treated as less again." And just like that, my life split into two parts, before that night, and everything that would come after. I don't remember leaving the restaurant. I vaguely remember Eleanor's hand on my arm, the stunned silence, the way Brooke's face twisted into something feral, but everything else blurred into motion and cold night air. One minute I was sitting at a table being humiliated, and the next, I was walking across the parking lot like a ghost, trying to understand what had just happened. Eleanor's driver opened the car door. "Miss Clark," he murmured gently. But even then, I wasn't sure if I should get in, because part of me still felt guilty. Guilty for Eleanor's decision. Guilty for Brooke's outrage. Guilty for simply existing in a family that had never wanted me. It's strange how deeply guilt clings to people who were taught to apologize for breathing. "Madison," Eleanor said softly behind me. "Come. There's more you need to know." Her voice alone anchored me, and I slid into the car seat. The door shut, muffling the echo of Brooke's yelling as security prevented her from following. We drove in silence for a few minutes, Seattle's late-night lights sliding across the windows like falling stars. My mind raced. Why me? Why everything? Why announce it like that? Finally, Eleanor breathed out long and slow. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "But I needed every piece of proof before I revealed what I'm about to tell you." I turned to her. "Proof of what?" She rested her hands on her lap, fingers intertwined. "Your adoption wasn't what you think it was." My heart thudded. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew what it would do to me. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a thick folder. "Your birth parents," she said gently, "left behind a trust, $800,000, meant solely for your upbringing, education, and care. I blinked at her. My voice cracked before it even formed words. What? Trust. Your parents died in an accident, Eleanor continued. But they were responsible people. They planned for your future. They set aside a large fund, so whoever adopted you would have everything needed to give you a good life. My throat tightened until it physically hurt. I never knew that. Eleanor nodded sadly. Because Linda and Charles never intended for you to. The folder felt heavy in my hands, heavier than any truth I'd ever carried. You mean, I whispered, the money was supposed to be for me? For you, she confirmed. Not for Brooke's private school, not for Dylan's car, not for family vacations, not for house renovations. My stomach dropped. I flipped through the documents, bank statements, transfers, dates. The timeline stretched across my entire childhood. Thousands spent here, hundreds there. Vacation after vacation, designer clothes, private school tuition, a new backyard added to the house. And every time I saw a big number, I remembered something small. Wearing second-hand clothes, eating leftovers because the good stuff was reserved for Brooke and Dylan. Hearing, sorry sweetheart, money is tight right now. Working 3 part-time jobs to pay for community college. Being told by my mother, we did everything for you. A tremor ran through my hands. They stole it, I whispered. They stole every dollar, Eleanor nodded. Every penny. And they lied to you about being a financial burden when, in reality, they were living comfortably off the money your parents left for you. The word stole echoed in my mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. For years, I had blamed myself for being a burden, for costing too much, for not deserving better. But the truth was clearer than glass now. I wasn't the burden, they were the thieves. Eleanor placed a hand over mine. I discovered this 2 years ago. I confronted them privately. They denied everything until proof was undeniable. Then they begged me to stay silent. My pulse hammered in my ears. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed time, she said. Time to gather every statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence. Time to build a case strong enough to protect you from the storm I knew they would unleash. And, she added, voice softening, I needed you to be ready. Ready. Was anyone ever ready to find out the people who raised them profited from their tragedy? I closed the folder slowly. My hands were ice. The car slowed as we approached Eleanor's estate grand, serene, lit softly against the night. A place that felt like the opposite of everything I had known growing up. You deserved so much more, Eleanor whispered. And they took it. She touched my cheek gently. But I'm going to make sure they can never take another thing from you again. A long silence stretched before I found enough air to speak. What happens now? I asked. Eleanor nodded toward the folder. Now we expose the truth. Now we take back what was yours. And now, we decide how to handle the people who stole your childhood. My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was something sharper, cleaner, resolve. She leaned back as the car rolled to a stop. Madison, she said quietly, your story changes tonight, forever. And as the doors opened and the cold night air swept around us, a single thought rooted itself in my mind I hadn't dared allow before. Maybe justice really does come, just not from the people you expected. Before I followed Eleanor inside, I paused just long enough to whisper a question into the darkone I wanted to ask the world, and maybe the people listening to my story. If your family stole your future, and then blamed you for not being enough, what would you do? Comment 1 if you know exactly how that feels. Then I stepped inside the house, carrying the truth I'd been denied for 22 years, and the unraveling had only just begun. I didn't sleep that night. Even in the safety of Eleanor's mansion, with its warm lighting and quiet hallways, my mind wouldn't settle. I kept replaying the way my mother looked when Eleanor said the words, I changed my will. The shock, the fury, the disbelief that someone she had controlled her whole life had finally slipped out of her grip. For the first time, I realized something chilling. It wasn't the inheritance that terrified them. It was losing control of me. By morning, the world had already changed. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop calls, texts, notifications stacking so quickly the screen froze for a moment. I hadn't even turned it on yesterday after the restaurant incident, but now there was no avoiding it. I hesitated before tapping the screen. Then, Everything flooded in at once. "Brooke, you're sick. You manipulated an old woman. This isn't over. My father. We need to talk immediately. Call me. My mother. How dare you twist things to make yourself look like the victim?" Another from Brooke, timestamped at 3:17 a.m. "Answer your phone before I come to that mansion myself." Threat after threat, lie after lie, desperation dripping from every word. Eleanor stepped into the room just as I was reading them, her cane tapping softly against the hardwood. "Do not engage," she said, not even needing to look at my screen to know what was happening. "I'm not," I whispered, but I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. "They're talking about me like I'm the enemy." "They're afraid," Eleanor replied. "For the first time in their lives, they're afraid of consequences." She sat beside me on the bed, her movements slow but intentional. "They know what they did. And they know the world is about to find out too." I swallowed. "But why attack so quickly? Why not try to talk to me first?" Eleanor looked at me with the kind of sadness that comes from living long enough to understand human nature. When people like them feel power slipping away, they do not reflect. They retaliate, and retaliate. They did. The first blow hit before noon. A news alert popped up on my phone. "Breaking. Billionaire matriarch leaves fortune to adopted granddaughter. Family claims manipulation." My chest tightened. They went to the media. Eleanor didn't look surprised. She turned on the TV. There they were, me mother and father sitting stiffly in a studio, pretending to look heartbroken. My mother dabbed at her eyes like a seasoned actress. "It's just shocking," she told the reporter. "Madison has always struggled emotionally. We supported her, loved her. We never imagined she'd do something like this to us." My father nodded solemnly. "We're worried. Someone must have put ideas in her head. Eleanor is sick. She's vulnerable." "Sick, vulnerable." Eleanor exhaled sharply. "I have the medical evaluations from last week proving otherwise. They know that." I watched as the reporter leaned in. "So you believe Madison influenced Eleanor in her current state?" My mother's lips trembled just enough to look believable. "We're not saying anything definitively, but yes. Something feels off." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just an attack. This was a narrative, a weapon crafted to destroy my credibility. The next blow hit an hour later. A blogger posted an exposé claiming my business wasn't really mine, that Eleanor had secretly funded it, that I'd positioned myself for years to inherit her assets, that I was socially awkward, emotionally unstable, and manipulative. I stared at the screen, numb. "None of this is true." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Facts don't matter to people who've already decided what they want to believe." By mid-afternoon, 3 more articles popped up. Someone anonymously leaked pictures of me from college, unflattering, one agreeing to paint me as unprofessional. And then came the private investigator. We were in Eleanor's study when her security team notified her. "Ma'am," the guard said, "we have a man outside your gate asking neighbors questions about Madison." Brooke. Of course Brooke would hire someone, because humiliation, lies, and manipulation weren't enough for her. She needed to dig, to destroy, to claw at anything she could use. Eleanor rose from her chair with a steadiness that surprised even the guard. "Keep him off the property. And notify Walter we're filing a restraining order." "Yes, ma'am." When the guard left, Eleanor turned to me. "Madison," she said gently, "you need to understand something." I looked at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. "This is the storm I prepared you for. This is why I gathered evidence, why I changed my will, why I did everything by the book." Her voice lowered. "They will try to ruin you before they let the truth ruin them." I swallowed hard. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," she said. "But you deserve justice." Silence stretched between USA, heavy, electric silence. I stared down at my trembling hands. "Why won't they just stop?" Eleanor leaned forward, her voice turning razor sharp. "Because guilty people don't stop. They escalate." Her words struck deep, carving themselves into me like truth I had always known, but never said aloud. And then the hook settled in my mind, sharp as glass. When you confront a liar, they deny. When you confront a thief, they deflect. But when you confront a guilty family, they burn the earth to save their image. That night, Eleanor's lawyers compiled every threatening message, every falsified claim, every smear attempt. I watched them build a wall of evidence strong enough to withstand a hurricane. Meanwhile, more messages poured in. My mother, you are tearing this family apart. Brooke, you think you won? Watch what happens next. And buried among them a single text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. I promise. I showed Eleanor. She nodded once. Good. That's another charge we can file. I didn't sleep again, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood. This wasn't just a fight for an inheritance. It was a fight for my truth, my name, my life. And they had no idea that the harder they pushed, the harder the world would push back. By the next morning, the attacks had only grown louder. New articles, anonymous posts, dozens of strangers in comment sections dissecting my life like they knew me. My inbox filled with messages calling me everything from a gold digger to a sociopath. It was surreal watching people build an entire character out of nothing but lies, but Eleanor remained unshaken. She moved through her home with a purpose I'd only ever seen in corporate boardrooms, her cane tapping with the rhythm of someone preparing for battle note, someone in their late 70s. When I walked into the study, I found her sitting with Walter, her longtime attorney, reviewing a stack of documents that looked like they belonged in a courtroom, not in a home office. Eleanor didn't look up. Madison, we're holding a press conference today. I froze. Today? Already? Walter nodded. Your family has gone public. We cannot leave the narrative in their hands. My pulse quickened. But I don't know what to say. What if I mess up? What if people think I'm lying? Eleanor set down her pen and looked at me, really looked. You don't need to perform, she said. You just need to tell the truth. The truth will do the rest. Then, softer, you've spent your whole life being silenced. Today, you speak. I swallowed hard, a knot forming in my chest. What if no one believes me? Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Then we show them why they should. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m., in the largest conference room of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals' downtown headquarters. A security team escorted us through a private entrance because the sidewalks outside were flooded with reporters, cameras, and people holding signs, some supporting me, some accusing me of everything under the sun. It struck me how quickly strangers pick sides when given just a headline. Inside, the room was already set up. Rows of cameras, microphones, journalists murmuring like restless birds. But when Eleanor entered, the room fell silent. She didn't look fragile. She didn't look sick. She looked like the formidable woman who had built an empire from nothing. We sat at a long table, Eleanor, Walter, and me. The placard in front of me read Madison Clark, and seeing my name printed so formally sent a strange, fear-laced pride through my chest. Eleanor leaned toward the microphone. Thank you for coming. Her voice was steady, so steady, it silenced even the whispers in the corners. I'm here to address the rumors surrounding my will, my health, and my granddaughter. She paused. Not adoptive granddaughter. Not ward. Granddaughter. The room leaned in. In the past week, Eleanor continued, my daughter and grandchildren have accused Madison of manipulating me. They have portrayed her as unstable, predatory, and deceitful. Her jaw tightened. I am here to state, clearly and unequivocally, that these accusations are lies. Cameras flashed wildly. Eleanor lifted a folder. Inside this is documented evidence of the emotional mistreatment Madison endured for 22 years in the Hayes household. Records, witness statements, and first-hand accounts. Another flash, another murmur. And here, she held up a second folder. Our financial records proving that the $800,000 trust intended for Madison's upbringing was misappropriated by Linda and Charles Hayes. Gasps rippled through the room. These funds were spent on vacations, private schooling, renovations, and luxuries Madison never received. She let the words settle. Then, I changed my will, because Madison is the only member of this family who possesses integrity, compassion, and a moral compass untouched by greed. My throat tightened. Cameras felt like they were staring into my soul. She did not manipulate me, Eleanor said firmly. She is the only person who has never asked me for anything. Then, she looked at me. Madison would like to say a few words. My heart thudded painfully as I leaned forward. The microphones felt too close, the cameras felt predatory. But I remembered Eleanor's words. Tell the truth. My whole life, I began slowly, I wanted to belong to a family that loved me. I tried to earn it. I tried to be grateful. I tried to stay quiet, even when it hurt. My voice cracked. But wanting love doesn't make you manipulative. And being adopted doesn't make you disposable. The room was silent. Not even a pen clicked. I didn't know about the will, I continued. I didn't know about the trust fund. I didn't know about any of this until recently. I didn't ask for money. I didn't expect anything. A breath, a swallow, a truth finally spoken. I just wanted a family. The weight of those words sank into the room. But silence wasn't made to last, because the door suddenly burst open. Brooke, her makeup smudged, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild. "You liar!" she screamed, charging forward. "You think you can fool everyone? You're not even one of us." Security rushed in, but not before she jabbed a finger toward the cameras. "That trust fund was ours. We earned it by raising you." The room erupted. Journalists shouted, questions. Cameras exploded with flashes. Security dragged Brooke out as she thrashed and cursed. But the damage was done, because she had said it on camera. She had confessed everything. Eleanor leaned back, her expression calm, almost peaceful. "Well," she muttered to me under her breath, "that saves us 30 minutes. Despite the chaos, a shaky smile tugged at my lips, because the world had just witnessed the truth. Not the version my family crafted. Not the lies they sold to reporters. The indisputable, undeniable truth. And here's the hook, the question that started racing through my mind as the press conference exploded into headlines. If someone exposes themselves so completely in front of the world, do they still deserve forgiveness? Or is that the moment you finally walk away for good? Comment what you think. Does a public confession erase years of private cruelty? Or does it confirm who they've been all along? 3 days after the press conference, the world was still replaying Brooke's meltdown. Clips of her shouting, "That trust fund was ours," spread across every platform imaginable. People stitched it, reacted to it, analyzed it frame by frame like it was a crime documentary. And in many ways, it was. But the real battle hadn't even begun. Because the court date had arrived. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters, camera crews, and spectators drawn in by the scandal. Security tightened their perimeter as Eleanor's town car pulled up. I got out first, my palms slightly sweating, but my breathing steady because Eleanor squeezed my hand. "You walk in with your head high," she whispered. "Not because of the money, because of the truth." Inside, the courtroom felt colder, sharper than the outside air. The tension was thick enough to taste. My family was already there. Brooke sat rigid, eyes swollen, makeup layered thick, as if she could paint over her reputation. Dylan stared straight ahead, his jaw twitching. My father looked like he hadn't slept in days. My mother Linda wore a soft cardigan and minimal makeup to look fragile, sympathetic, misunderstood, but none of them looked at me. Not once. Walter leaned over. "Remember, don't react unless addressed. They want you emotional. Your restraint is your power." Eleanor nodded approvingly. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Judge Morrison's stern eyes, hair pulled back so tightly it felt symbolic. She looked like the kind of woman who saw through everything: lies, theatrics, manipulation. The kind of judge you wanted, if you were on the right side of truth. "Let's proceed," she said. My family's attorney went first, painting a picture so distorted it was almost artistic if you liked horror art. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, pacing slowly, "this is a case of undue influence over an elderly, ill woman. My clients are simply trying to protect their mother's legacy from manipulation." He gestured toward me without looking directly. "Miss Clark, though adopted, has always struggled emotionally. She has a history of insecurity." I stiffened. Walter stood before I could speak. "Objection. Baseless character defamation." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said sharply. "Move on." Their lawyer swallowed and continued. "Miss Whitmore's sudden decision to leave her entire estate to one grandchild, completely erasing her children and other grandchildren, is highly unusual. Suspicious, even." Eleanor chuckled under her breath, loud enough for nearby lawyers to hear, not loud enough to get reprimanded. "And," he said dramatically, "we intend to prove Madison exerted pressure, leveraging Eleanor's declining health." Walter rose with the confidence of a man holding a full house at a poker table. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to present Exhibit A." The lights dimmed slightly as a screen lowered, and then it unfolded. 22 years of neglect, emotional abuse, exclusion, and favoritism. Birthday photos where I wasn't in frame. School achievements ignored. Hospital forms listing me as other. Witness statements from teachers, neighbors, family, friends. Gasps rippled through the room. Walter didn't stop. Exhibit B, financial documentation, proving that the $800,000 trust, created by Madison's biological parents, was used entirely by the Hayes family for personal benefit, none of which went to Madison. He clicked the remote. Vacation charges, private school tuition for Brooke, 16-year-old Dylan's car, home renovations, luxury purchases, every dollar traced, every receipt verified, every lie exposed. My mother's face collapsed into her hands. My father stared at the desk, jaw clenched in humiliation, and then, Walter clicked once more. Exhibit C, video footage from the press conference. Brooke appeared on the screen, screaming, "That trust fund was ours. We earned it by raising you." The sound echoed painfully across the room. Brooke shut her eyes, shoulders trembling. Dylan cursed under his breath. My mother whispered, "Turn it off. Please turn it off." The judge didn't. The judge watched every frame. When the video ended, the silence was brutal. Judge Morrison steepled her fingers. "Do the contesting parties wish to respond?" My family's lawyer looked defeated. He turned to them, mother, my father, Brooke, Dylan, but none of them could meet his eyes. He cleared his throat. "No further argument, Your Honor." And that was the moment I realized something important. They hadn't come to win. They had come hoping to intimidate me, hoping I'd break down, hoping I'd look unstable enough to cast doubt. But the evidence had stripped them down to who they really were. Judge Morrison didn't hesitate. "The will executed by Miss Eleanor Whitmore is valid," she said. "The contest is dismissed with prejudice." Brooke gasped. Linda choked back a sob. Dylan's fist slammed against the table. But the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she said, turning her gaze toward my parents, "the misappropriated trust fund sate, $100,000 plus, accrued interest over 22 years totaling, approximately $2.5 million must be repaid in full." My mother's knees buckled. She collapsed into her chair. My father closed his eyes like the world had finally caught up to him. Brooke burst out, "This is insane! She's not even—" "Sit down," the judge snapped, "or I will hold you in contempt." Eleanor placed a hand on my knee. "It's over," she whispered. But as my family was escorted out, my mother in tears, my father silent, Brooke cursing, Dylan shaking with rage, I knew something else. For them, this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of their fall. And for me, this was the first day I finally breathed freely. As security led my family past the reporters waiting outside, microphones flew toward me. "Madison, how do you feel? Do you think they deserved it? What happens next?" I didn't answer. Because the real question wasn't for them. It was for anyone listening. When a family finally faces the consequences they've spent years avoiding, is it karma? Or is it justice? What do you think? The courtroom victory should have felt like the ending. A clean cut, a door slamming shut on 22 years of hurt. But the truth is, endings rarely come neatly packaged. They ripple out, stretching into the days that follow, reshaping everything you thought you knew. 3 days after the ruling, I woke up in one of the guest rooms of Eleanor's estate, sunlight pouring across the floor like warm gold. For the first time in years, I breathed without feeling like I owed someone an apology simply for existing. But peace has a way of arriving with a shadow right behind it. That morning, I walked downstairs to find Eleanor sitting alone in the conservatory, wrapped in a soft cream shawl. She was staring out at the garden, the roses, the fountain, the stone walkway, but her eyes seemed far away, as though she was looking at something beyond this world. "Morning," I said softly. She turned her head and smiled, but it was faint. The kind of smile someone gives when they're fighting a pain you can't see. "Sit with me," she said. I did. And that's when I noticed it. The tremor in her hands, the paleness in her cheeks, the way her breath caught in tiny pauses. The courtroom had taken more from her than she let anyone know. "Are you okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't pretend. She never pretended with me. "I'm tired, sweetheart. More tired than I've ever been." Her voice was soft, fragile, almost. The Eleanor I knew had always been a force, a storm, a woman who stepped into rooms with the quiet authority of someone who built her own world. But today, she was smaller somehow, dimmer. "Is it the cancer?" I whispered. She nodded once. The truth settled like a weight on my chest. I had known she was sick, she'd told me before, but knowing something and watching it take shape are two different battles. "I don't want to leave you with unfinished business," she said. I blinked back, the ache gathering behind my eyes. "You're not leaving." "Not yet," her smile softened. "Everyone leaves, Madison. What matters is what they leave behind." She reached for the folder on the table. Inside were documents, transition plans, legal papers, letters to board members, instructions for the foundation she wanted me to build. "You're the future of this family," she said, placing her hand over mine. "Not Linda, not Charles, not Brooke or Dylan. You." My throat tightened. "I'm not ready for that." "You are," she insisted gently. "I've watched you grow despite suffering that would have broken most adults. I've watched you work, build, survive. I chose you not out of pity but because you are capable." She paused, then added, "And because goodness should be rewarded, not punished." Those words cracked something open in me. For so long, I believed kindness made me weak, that staying soft in a home that sharpened everyone else made me naive. But Eleanor made me see something I never allowed myself to see. There is power in not becoming what hurt you. She continued reviewing the documents with me, explaining shareholders, divisions, managing teams, charitable branches. But halfway through a sentence, she winced just a flicker, barely noticeable. I noticed. "Let's stop for now," I said quickly. "You need rest." She shook her head. "No, I need to prepare you." But her voice faltered. The kind of falter that tells you the body is keeping score, in ways pride can't hide. I moved beside her, gently taking the papers from her hands. "We have time." Her eyes found mine, kind, wise, but lined with a truth she couldn't protect me from. "No, sweetheart, we don't." Over the next 2 weeks, her health declined faster than any of us wanted to admit. Some days, she was sharp discussing strategy, guiding me through her empire like I was stepping into a legacy instead of a labyrinth. Other days, she drifted between realities, calling me by my birth mother's name, or humming songs she said she hadn't heard in 40 years. I stayed by her side through all of it. When she couldn't walk, I held her arm. When she couldn't eat, I coaxed her with soft soups. When she couldn't sleep, I read aloud the way she used to read to me when I visited her as a child. Sometimes I wondered if the universe was giving us the time my adoptive family stole. On her last lucid morning, she asked me to open the window. Cold air drifted in, carrying the smell of rain. "I want to go while the world still feels alive," she said with a faint smile. I sat beside her, holding her fragile hand. "Madison," she whispered, her voice a thin thread. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," I wanted to say. But I let her speak. "Promise me, you won't let them back into your heart just because you pity them." I swallowed hard. She knew me too well. "They will crumble under the weight of their own choices," she said. "Let them. That is their journey. Yours is different." "I promise," I whispered. She breathed in slowly one final, steady breath. "You were the only real family I ever had." Those were her last words. Her hand relaxed in mine. And just like that, she was gone. The world felt too quiet, too still, like everything had paused to acknowledge a life that demanded respect. I held her hand long after her skin cooled, because letting go felt like losing the only person who ever saw me fully. But grief has a way of shaping you, not just breaking you. And as I sat there, the promise she made me speak played on repeat in my mind. Do not let the people who broke you benefit from your healing. So here's the question, the hook I kept asking myself as I planned her private funeral. When someone gives you a second chance at life, do you honor them by forgiving the ones who hurt you, or by finally choosing yourself? Tell me, what would you do? Grief is strange. It doesn't hit like a hammer. It settles like dust. Quiet, heavy, everywhere. The morning after Eleanor's funeral, her house felt too big, too still. Every hallway whispered her absence. Every room held pieces of her books, her perfume, her handwritten notes, reminding me of meetings or recipes, or which tea leaves she preferred. But grief wasn't the only thing waiting for me. Justice was, too. And justice isn't quiet. Justice arrives like a storm. 3 days after Eleanor's passing, the full transfer of assets began. Walter met me in the study, his suit impeccably pressed, his tone calm but firm. "Madison," he said gently, "this is now your world." He laid folder after folder on the desk, documents detailing the companies, properties, bank accounts, investments. To anyone else it would have looked overwhelming, but to me, it felt like a map, a roadmap Eleanor had spent weeks preparing me to walk. But while I was stepping into a future built on her trust, my former family was stepping into consequences built on their choices. It started with the money. The court had ordered my adoptive parents to repay the full $2.5 million from the stolen trust fund. They had 90 days. 90 days to find money they had burned over decades. Within a month, everything began collapsing for them. Their house foreclosed, the cars repossessed, savings gone, retirement accounts drained, my father's company pressured to launch an internal ethics review, and then the criminal charges landed: fraud, misappropriation of trust assets, negligence involving a minor, the kind of charges that stick. I learned from Walter that my father had broken down in the courthouse hallway, repeating, "This can't be happening," over and over. Ironic, considering those were the exact words I'd whispered into my pillow as a kid when they ignored me, belittled me, and told me I should be grateful for crumbs. As for my mother, Linda Shea tried her usual tactic: tears. "I didn't know," she sobbed on camera during an interview outside the courthouse. But the world wasn't buying it anymore. Not after the trust fund records. Not after Brooke's meltdown video. Not after Eleanor's press conference. Public opinion had shifted so brutally that comment sections became digital battlegrounds. She knew everything. Suing your own adoptive daughter? Wild. Karma wearing heels today. And then there was Brooke. If my parents fell, Brooke crashed. Her meltdown clip had gone viral, but what happened next cemented her downfall. Brands cut ties. Her employer suspended her. Her husband filed for divorce 3 days later. She tried launching a YouTube channel to tell her side, but every comment section was a battlefield. I shouldn't have looked at the comments, but I did. Top comment: "Girl, even your lies are underperforming." Second most liked: "Someone get her a PR team, a therapist, and maybe a muzzle." I laughed. I shouldn't have, but I did. Even Dylan the quiet one wasn't spared. Without the family name's reputation to prop him up, his bank threatened to fire him for undisclosed financial involvement in fraudulent family assets, and the private college degree he bragged about, turns out it didn't mean much when the tuition used to pay for it was stolen money. Everything they had ever leaned on, money, reputation, entitlement, crumbled like sand slipping through open fingers. Meanwhile, I spent my days building the life Eleanor had nudged me toward. I hired a management team for the companies. I met with advisors. I signed documents, transferring ownership. And slowly, piece by piece, I stepped into the role Eleanor had prepared me for. But the most important step happened quietly. It happened when I signed the founding papers for the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation for Abused and Neglected Children. Not because it sounded noble, not because it would look good in headlines, but because it was real, because it mattered, because kids like me deserved better than families who treated love like a luxury. We opened our first office 6 weeks later. The first child we helped, an 8-year-old boy placed with relatives who treated him like a servant, thugged me so tightly I felt something inside me settle. This is the legacy Eleanor meant for me. Not the money, not the power, the purpose, but peace is never fully peaceful. One evening, just as I was leaving the foundation, Walter called me. "They filed an appeal," he said. Of course they did. My former family couldn't accept defeat, even after drowning in evidence. But Walter didn't sound worried. "Don't lose sleep over it. Appeals don't change facts." I nodded, even though a familiar heaviness stirred in my chest. After everything, after the accusations, after the court battle, after Eleanor's death, after the truth came out, they still couldn't admit what they'd done. They still couldn't see me as a human being, only as a target. And that's when the hook hit me. Some families don't break when the truth comes out. They break when the lies stop working. So here's my question, the one I want people to really think about. If someone destroys themselves trying to destroy you, are you supposed to feel sorry for them? Or is that just karma finally clocking in on overtime? Comment and tell me, do you feel bad for them? Or should I send them a "Thank you for exposing yourselves" fruit basket? In the weeks following the appeal, life settled into a strange kind of quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just different. For the first time, my days weren't shaped by fear, guilt, or tiptoeing around people who treated love like a weapon. I woke up each morning in a home that felt like mine, not because I owned it, but because it held no threat, no judgment, no whispered criticisms waiting behind a closed door. Grief still came in waves, usually in the mornings, when sunlight hit the hallway the same way it used to when Eleanor walked through it, humming softly. Sometimes I'd turn a corner and expect to find her reading in the conservatory, or sipping tea, or scribbling notes in the margins of a business journal. But grief had softened into gratitude, a warmth, a presence. Like she hadn't left at all, she had simply stepped into the foundation of everything I was building. The Eleanor Whitmore Foundation expanded faster than any of us anticipated. By month 3, we opened 2 more offices, one in Tacoma, one in Spokane. By month 6, we had helped over 100 children transition out of dangerous homes. Every story we touched carried echoes of my own, and each one reminded me why Eleanor had chosen me, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted change. Every decision I made, from staffing to outreach programs, felt like another stitch in the tapestry of the future she'd wanted to create. A legacy of protection, compassion, justice. One afternoon, while reviewing grant proposals, Thomas walked in holding a thick stack of envelopes. "Mail for you, Miss Clark." I smiled. "It's Madison. It's always Madison." He returned the smile, the kind that only comes from someone who's known both your storms and your sunshine. Inside the envelopes were letters, handwritten ones from kids the foundation had helped. A girl who finally got placed with a loving aunt. A boy who called us his safe place. A teenager who said, "Now I know my story doesn't end in the house that hurt me." I placed the letters in a carved wooden box Eleanor had gifted me months before. She once told me, "Fill this with reminders of who you are, not who they tried to make you." I was filling it well. Meanwhile, the collapse of my former family played out quietly in the background. News articles shifted from scandal to consequence. My father began serving his prison sentence. My mother, unable to pay the restitution, had to declare bankruptcy. Brooke attempted to rebrand herself online with a healing journey vlog, but the internet wasn't quick to forget. Dylan took out loans he couldn't afford, trying to rebuild an image already cracked beyond repair. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't have to. Their fall wasn't my victory, it was simply the result of choices catching up with them. And maybe, in a different world, I might have pitied them, but pity belongs to those who were once kind. They weren't. It was a gray, drizzling afternoon when the weight of everything finally settled. I stood outside the foundation's newest building, a modern, bright space with glass walls and a garden out front. Children were laughing inside, their voices carrying through the open windows. Safe, loud, unafraid. Eleanor would have loved that sound. I closed my eyes, letting the rain cool my skin, letting the moment breathe. I had spent so many years wondering who I was, outside of the Clark family's shadow. Wondering if I was small, invisible, a burden. Now I finally knew. I wasn't what they tried to make me. I wasn't the girl who apologized for existing. I wasn't the child who believed cruelty was normal. I was a survivor, a leader, a builder of futures. And for the first time, I didn't fear looking ahead. Later that night, I sat in Eleanor's old study, now sorting through her journals. Between pages of business strategies and philanthropic plans, I found a note she had written months before her death, in her familiar handwriting. "Madison, if you're reading this, then my time has ended, but yours is only beginning. Live in a way that proves kindness is not weakness. Live in a way that shows the world who you are. And whatever you do, never shrink yourself to fit inside the places you've outgrown." A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I folded the note carefully and placed it inside my wooden keepsake box. Then, for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to dream without limits, not because someone gave me permission, but because I finally understood. Eleanor hadn't rescued me. She had revealed me, revealed the version of myself I'd been forced to bury. Now, it was my turn to live for her, and for the child I used to be. As I closed the study door, A thought hit me, Oni, that felt like a doorway opening instead of closing. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with becoming the person they never believed you could be. And maybe, that's the greatest revenge of all. So let me ask you, if you've ever rebuilt yourself after being torn down, what did that moment feel like for you? And if you want more stories about rising after the fall, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support helps these stories reach people who need them most.